We're continuing our unit on voting and apportionment. We've had a couple of topics about voting already, and now we come to apportionment. So, what is this about? Well, let's begin by looking at the United States Constitution. Article 1 of the Constitution is about the legislature, and here are some extracts from that Article 1. First of all, in Section 1, we are told that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Well, I guess that's pretty clear. It's saying that we have two houses in our legislature in the United States. We have a Senate and we have a House of Representatives. Now let's dispose of the Senate rather quickly here. The Senate is filled in the following way. Every state has two senators. So we have 50 states, and each one, such as Ohio, has two senators, and therefore a total of 100 senators currently. Now, what about the House of Representatives? Well, here let's look at some additional language. Let's look at Section 2 of Article 1 of the Constitution, and clause number 3 says the following. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to the respective numbers. The actual enumeration shall be within every subsequent term of 10 years, and each state shall have at least one representative. All right, we can forget about direct taxes. We're not concerned with that at the moment. But it's saying in the House of Representatives, the number of representatives of each state should be proportional to its population. Now, that means, of course, we need to know the populations of the states, and for that purpose, the Constitution says that there shall be an actual enumeration. We now call it a census. It's conducted every 10 years in the United States, most recently in 2010. And knowing the populations of the states, we therefore can apportion, as we say, the representatives to the states, or apportion the seats. Now, there's one rule that should be observed, of course. Every state shall have at least one representative, no matter how small it is in population. All right, so this is the basic question of apportionment. How do you decide in a representative body how many representatives there are for each district? In the case of House of Representatives, when I say district, I mean states, and so for that body, the question is, how many representatives should each state have? In apportioning the House of Representatives, we're supposed to give seats to states in proportion to their populations, and that means we need to determine the apportionment. We must say how many representatives each state will have. Now, it might sound simple enough, but if you begin to think about it for a moment, you realize there might become a problem because you can't divide representatives between states. Well, now, here's the census. It was last conducted in 2010, and the results are being now used to apportion the House of Representatives. That's beginning with the 2012 elections and then the subsequent Congress elected in 2012, which began to serve in January 2013. Now, if you think that this is a completely straightforward issue, let me point out that this has been quite contentious in American history, deciding how the House of Representatives would be apportioned. In fact, at another part of the Constitution, you will find laid out the procedure for passing a law, taking a bill and turning it into law. And as you surely know, it has to be passed by both houses, that is by the Senate and the House of Representatives, and then it must be signed by the President of the United States. Now, the President has the option not to sign. If he doesn't sign, then the bill goes back and it can still be passed by supermajorities of both houses. But effectively, the President saying no, he won't sign a bill is often tantamount to killing the bill. And that process is called a veto. And the very first veto in the history of the United States was by the first president, George Washington. In April of 1792, he vetoed a measure passed by both houses of Congress, both by the House and the Senate. And what was that bill? It was a bill that was supposed to determine how the House of Representatives would be apportioned. So the very first veto in the history of the country was vetoing of a bill having to do with apportioning the House of Representatives. He laid out his objections here. We don't need to look at all the details of that, although let me also point out that in doing this, George Washington also set another precedent, namely he didn't just take the bill and say, I won't sign this bill. He actually wrote back to Congress and gave his reasons. And that's now standard practice. If you're the president and you veto a bill, you tell Congress what you object to in the bill. All right, looking at the House of Representatives, since 1941, the size of the House has been fixed at 435. Before that, it could be variable, but to avoid certain sorts of wrangling and to stop the House from growing any larger in 1941, it was fixed at this size. Now, actually, that number was exceeded momentarily in the years 1959 through 1961, but that was simply because there were two new states in the United States, namely Alaska and Hawaii, the most recently admitted states to the Union. And this map is showing the current apportionment of the House of Representatives. This is based on the 2010 census. This is an official map coming from the U.S. Census Bureau. As we know, there are 435 seats, and if you look at each individual state, you'll see a number written inside the state boundary or sometimes somewhat outside it, and it's showing you how many representatives each state has. For example, the state of Ohio has 16 representatives currently in the House of Representatives. The most populous state, of course, has the most representatives. That's California with 53. The second most populous state is Texas with 36 representatives. And some states have only a single representative. Some of those have a single representative because of the statement in the Constitution that each state shall have at least one. They have populations so small that they certainly don't deserve a second one. I'm thinking in particular of Wyoming, which has just a single representative. Now, this map also shows you how things have changed. There's a census every 10 years, so there are changes going on over each of those decades, and the change from 2000 to 2010 is indicated on this map by some colors. The shades of blue are indicating states that gained seats, and the shades of green are showing states that lost representatives. You'll note, for example, that the state of Ohio lost 2 seats in the House of Representatives. It used to have 18 and now has 16. You'll see a pattern to where the states are located that lost representatives. They're in the Northeast and around the Great Lakes out towards the Midwest. Maybe one anomaly is the state of Louisiana. Do you know why? In one word, Katrina, which depopulated the state. The states in blue are those that gained additional representatives. They're concentrated in the South and in the West. And the most notable one by far is the state of Texas, which gained 4 seats in the House of Representatives over that decade. For me, it's also noteworthy to look at California. This is the first time in over 100 years that there was no change in the representation of California in the House of Representatives. California did grow in population, but its growth was approximately the same as the entire rest of the country, so it did not, in fact, get any additional representatives. Well, this slide is actually asking some questions that I just answered a moment ago, namely which states gained representatives and why, and which states lost representatives. Maybe to add on just a little bit to that, states which lost representatives weren't necessarily losing population. That's not the point. They just weren't growing as fast as the rest of the country. For example, Ohio actually gained people between the 2 censuses, but not very many, and it lagged behind the growth of the rest of the country and therefore lost representatives. All right, before we look at apportionment, let me go on to what would happen next. Once it's decided how many representatives each state should have, then you have to decide on the district lines. So this has to be done every 10 years. You have to redraw the district lines. Now, this must be done in every state. Even if its apportionment didn't change, it could be that there was internal motion within the state. So you want to keep the districts almost exactly the same size in terms of population. So everyone needs to do redistricting, but it's an especially contentious or serious job when apportionment changes, either increasing or decreasing. Now, for example, in a state like Ohio, where the apportionment is decreased, typically what happens is that certain sitting representatives are squeezed out of their seats. Here's an example from the most recent, maybe the most noteworthy example, or the most notorious example, depending on your point of view, your political affiliation. Here is a district which was deliberately drawn to go all the way from Center City, Toledo, to parts of Cleveland. It's a very long and narrow district running along the shore of Lake Erie. It's hardly holding together at certain points. And the point of this district was actually to squeeze two sitting representatives, Marcy Kaptur and Dennis Kucinich, into the same district. So they had to, if they decided to run again, they had to run against each other. In fact, they did both run, and Marcy Kaptur won that. Dennis Kucinich is no longer in the House of Representatives.